Look, firstly, you heard what the Minister had to say. You know what CEDA's view is on vocational education and training. As a general kicker-inner for all of you, I mean, a criticism is often that it doesn't matter what level of education we're talking about, you know, we're not really training people for real jobs that exist out there today. How are you responding to that sort of criticism in terms of vocational education and training, skill levels, apprenticeships and so on more generally? Is it a valid criticism? We'll start at the end and work our way across.
Thanks very much. Well, I guess, I mean, I'll speak on behalf of healthcare generally, but I don't know how this translates out to other industries. But I do think that it's a combination of enterprise and institutions to craft how skillful people become in any career. So I think as much as just setting up and expecting that there's a generic set of training that happens and then you take them and they're capable of doing what you want them to do, belies what business is really about, which is differentiating that product and getting customers to buy that product from you. So at Bupa we take a very collective approach with all of the training organisations that we work with, so that we're just as much part of curriculum design and the things that we're looking for in order for those programs to roll out across our business. And we're up and down the east coast of Australia. We're the largest provider in the nation. We have 9,000 staff. So, and actually just in this last 3 years, probably everybody in this room knows, the aged care space is changing dramatically across the country. And I think you'll see it sort of consolidate and professionalise much faster in the coming years, just out of the growing need. I think we have nearly 500,000 people already working in aged care. It'll be 1.3 million in about 20 years' time. So it's a huge growth part of the nation. And we should be very careful too. I'm sure people have seen lots of horror stories on the press. That's all the press ever seems to want to say about aged care, are the horror stories. I tell you, there are a lot of really nice stories, about 97% of the time, that really don't play out. And a lot of that comes from working with all of our people at every level, making sure that they're included, that they matter to how that product and that service rolls out for people. And I think that the Minister touched on a lot of those things today. So it's as much up to businesses, I think, as it is to training organisations to make this work.
Nick?
Necessity focuses the eye, and I think that in the transport industry we are heading into a 10-year period where not only are we going through enormous growth, with this government spending about $20 to $30 billion in infrastructure, but similarly up in New South Wales globally, about $2 trillion being spent on transport systems, upgrading, rebuilding, or just building. And as such, we have a real challenge here in being able to meet that need with qualified, capable people. And in the rail industry, we've got a double whammy. I guess it's in quite a number of industries. Utilities is similar, where also in the next 10 years, with the demographics we have, looks like we're going to lose about 40% of our capability. So with both of those pieces coming together at the same time, we're now front and centre with regards to what we need from a competence perspective. The other thing, of course, is in the rail industry is we're an accredited rail operator, and as the accredited rail operator, we're responsible for the competence of the people on our network, which from my perspective means safety. So making sure that the quality of the training is of the highest calibre is absolutely critical. So working in collaboration with this government and the Skills Commissioner with regards to removing shonky RTOs is front and centre for us. It's so important. So you know, we're in a really good space, but a really tricky space as well, because there's a lot of hard work to be done in the next 10 years.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with what the two previous presenters said. Look, I think in terms of whether it works, that notion, look, there were 4.5 million enrolments in vocational education and training in 2015, and if we just focus on employers, they were over 80% satisfied. So that tells you largely the product works, notwithstanding some of the high-profile problems that we've got, which we'll, I'm sure, talk about. But it's a partnership. Where it works well in vocational education and training is where, yes, a quality training college, and there's been some problems with selection, delivers a qualification, you still need an employer to work intensively with that graduate to ensure they get that workplace experience and vocational experience. Colleges can't do it in institution or purely online. That can't work. It's got to be about a relationship with industry. So we certainly want to see industry in the driver's seat in our sector.
Yeah, I'd have to build on that. As a skills service organisation, our role is to work hand in hand with industry. We support the industries that we look after to look at what the skills needs are now and in the future, and then look at how well the current training packages meet those skills needs. And what we're seeing across all of the industries, which are business services, financial services, ICT, education, printing and graphic arts, and culture-related industries, is that each of them is being disrupted in a different way, either through fintech in financial services, through process automation, a whole range of different things. So what might be fit for purpose at the moment is very, very fast becoming not fit for purpose. So what we're focused on is that working with industry and with RTOs to say, what are we going to need in the very near future, and can we make the training packages meet those needs? Because at the moment, and I think this was touched upon in your report, it can take, and the Minister said it as well, it can take quite a long time to develop qualifications. Too long, really, for the fast pace of change in industry. So we need to do something about how we can make that happen faster and make sure they continue to be relevant.
I mean, the issue of the qualification that somebody gets when they come out of a TAFE college or a private provider, we've made some commentary around that in our report as well. Is there a consensus view around the nature of a qualification that somebody needs to have if they complete a program of training? Is there a particular certificate level that needs to be attained? Are there certificates that perhaps could be provided by another form of educational provider? It's an embracing question, really, about the nature of qualification. You go to university, I mean, you go to Melbourne University, you do a generalist course and then you specialise after that. Go to most other universities, La Trobe, whatever, you do 3 years study to do an undergraduate qualification in a particular thing and you come out with a piece of paper. What about in the vocational education and training sector? Have we got that right?
I'm happy to start if you like, and then Sarah can correct me. Look, I think the world's changing, and it's changing so fast. Almost every occupation is going to have robotics impact on it, animation, just real creative skills and problem-solving skills are required. Australia's had a proud history of competency-based training. We've got really our qualification structures are designed for occupations, and that's the problem. The world's changing too fast. Only around 40% of our graduates in VET go on and work in the industry that they studied. So that tells you wiring a qualification down in absolute detail around an occupation is failing that student. They need portability, they need skills that help them move across multiple careers, and the report touches on that. So certainly I think we're in a phase now where those lights are starting to come on, but the world's moving too fast. We need radical reform. Now, I heard the Minister talk about they're going to have their own approach to qualification design. I understand why he's doing that, but I'm really worried about it. What we need, we've got a national qualification structure, and we've got to shake the tree really hard to get that system to start to work.
Does industry agree with that?
Absolutely, I do. I think that the speed in which things are changing is incredible. In the rail industry itself, you know, we're moving now to automated railways around the world, and it is a different industry we're moving into. You know, the old-fashioned rail jobs, if you like, will start to disappear, and we need to be ready for that. And we move at glacial speed, so it would seem, with regards to reviewing the qualifications that are out there. We need to really have a much more joined-up approach between academia and industry, which I know that the Skills Commissioner is very passionate about, and the Minister is, because it's the only way we're going to get to the right place. But I think the step before that, and the point that I tried to make before in asking the Minister a question around career choices, I think that's a really critical piece as well. Because in all of this, the last thing we want is people going off and taking half a dozen non-complementary qualifications because they're not quite sure what they want to do. We need to be giving younger people at an earlier stage in their lives better advice around what careers are out there. I think that's a really important piece.
I guess aged care is a little different to that. As much as there will be a digital revolution, I think in aged care, much like there has been in healthcare, I think it's more enabling. So the capturing of data to get insight in how better to serve or to notice things better that you can change across the industry to people's benefit. We will want technology to do that sort of thing, but it's not going to replace the roles that we've got now in Cert 3 of treating people well and having literacy, numeracy skills to enable critical problem solving skills, any of that. We rely, by the way, intensively on carers' skills of observation, of change in any of our residents. They are the ones with the resident most of the time. We involve them in all of our resident review meetings in order to capture for the senior clinicians like the doctors what has happened to this resident that may create a change in the need of service. So I think a lot of those things will continue, and Cert 3 is fundamental. We generally take only Cert 3 certified people. We like that to come from quality providers. I think the dodgy providers that have been talked about, they've produced a groundswell of people with a qualification that doesn't work, that they don't come with the skills and the competencies we need to deliver. We're needing to ask them to sit again if they want to come and work at Bupa. I think that's really unfair, but there's not much else we can do. I mean, without that basic training, you take far too much risk in personal service. So I think that qualification for us will still be there. And I'm fine with it being a year or longer than a year, and people realising that to deliver this personal service really does take a lot of intentional thinking, not just reaction. And that course really helps us with that, so we'd be supportive.
Okay. Sarah, I wonder from your perspective, could we apply a bit of an international gauge over things? From the Australian training context as compared to what happens in overseas jurisdictions, how well are we doing in terms of vocational education and training? Is there any specific economy that we may learn a little bit more from that could help us improve that?
It's a really interesting question because the Australian vet brand has got a really good reputation overseas still. I mean, I've only been over here from the UK for a couple of years, but the UK looked at Australia as an example of a really good system. So I do think we might be trading on our previous reputation, because I do think other countries are now looking at different ways of doing things. There are two really interesting examples in your report from Hong Kong and Switzerland. But you've also got to think about the cultural differences in different countries. So the UK, for example, has just published their post-16 skills plan. It's got some really interesting developments in there about looking at vocational pathways rather than specific occupations. Very much focused also on looking at what happens in vet in schools. I think we can look at other countries. They all have elements of really good systems, but we have to look at the Australian context. And the Australian context has its own special attributes. So whether it's regional, remote locations, whether it's how we help migrant workers to have their qualifications recognised and become productive in the workforce, whether it's the fact that we've got a growing problem with graduate underemployment, and how are we making sure that people have got the right pathway to go down. I completely agree with the sentiment about careers advice. I think at the moment our system is focused on getting as many people as possible into universities, and schools feel compelled to do that. And I don't think they're necessarily looking at what alternative pathways there are of equal value. So, for example, I've got a particular passion for higher level apprenticeships. I worked on it in the UK. It's an alternative route to university for whatever reason, if somebody doesn't want to go or doesn't feel they want to, have to. So can we provide different routes into really good careers without having to always look down the university route?
I wonder then, with that overview, whether each of you has a comment on what, and bearing in mind what is in our report, the Minister's comments as well, from a good public policy perspective, an outcome that you would like to see. Is there anything specific at a government level, and I'm using the term to embrace the Commonwealth and the states, Is there anything specific that needs to be improved so that the vocational education training system adds the value that you would expect either in your industry as a provider or as a commentator?
I mean, I certainly think the Minister's presentation was spot on with the sorts of things that do need to happen. They're highlighted in your report too. Just like any industry, the ability to determine quality and output from that service that the government's paying for really ought to be very obvious. There should be competency assessment at the end of those courses in order to validate that you've produced the outcome expected for the money paid. I think a lot of those things, had they have been in place, we might have not gone down the road that we have gone down in Australia and maybe kept the reputation that we do value. That said, I think there are a lot of really good providers of training out there, and probably in the 3 years I've been at Bupa Aged Care, we've had one set of medication training that didn't work. We tried on a national basis. It got rolled out in variable quality. We addressed it really quickly because obviously we're testing the competency ourselves of the carers coming back into the home. And of course we've moved to a model of care where for Schedule 4 Schedule 4 drugs and below, we allow the carers under dispensation from the registered nurses to allocate out those medications. So they all need to be trained independently of Bupa to do that. And again, we test before we allow that medication to happen. So yes, I think validating that the course, that the length of time, the outputs are measured, and that they've got feedback from the students enrolled in those courses. Whistleblowing, I mean, that should have been a really big part, I think, of what's happened in the last couple of years, which I think the United States is better about than we are. But I think the government really ought to be around whistleblowing to these sorts of things, because I do think it helps head things off early.
The point Sarah made about the high regard Australia is held in overseas is an important one, I think, here. And I think, again, as you quite rightly said, I think, maybe we're just coming off where we should be with regards to that. We've been, with the growth of railways around the world, we've been inundated with requests from overseas to come over and have a look at how we do things and join up the vet scheme into the university schemes, and so we can roll out in Thailand and Oman and other areas around the world, they can roll out a similar system. I think the challenge we have here is we need to just stop and think a little bit. What are we trying to get out of this? What's the end game we're trying to produce here? How many people have got qualifications they never use? And I'm sorry to rattle on about it, but I think a lot of that really does keep coming back to having far more integrated approach to career management from an early age within schools. And if you've got that, you'll invest the right money in the right qualifications, both personally and from a government perspective, and you'll get the output you want. Highly skilled, motivated people working in the industries of their choice rather than industries they've fallen into.
Look, I think get the product right. We've talked about that. The changing economy, we need to make sure our product's fit for purpose. So that's about a redesign of the way we approach qualifications. I think get the funding right. States and territories have reduced funding in vocational education by 30% in the last 10 years. That's just inconceivable. But even more so, it's more fragmented across the country than it's ever been. So that's your national partnership opportunity. Get the quality assurance right. There's very clear evidence that there's been significant quality assurance failures, not in higher ed, Anthony, I quickly add. Welcome to Anthony. And the final bit is probably around getting your selections right and making sure that in the publicly funded sector, government have got a very clear oversight and stewardship role. In other words, if there are adverse or perverse outcomes, jump on them hard, just like the Minister's described.
So I think we should go back to what is the purpose of vocational education and training. And if the purpose is to create a thriving, successful, productive economy with a socially cohesive society, then I think we need to look at how we therefore structure VET and how we fund it so that we don't give perverse incentives to funding things that aren't going to lead people into productive jobs. So we have a much better match between demand and supply. It's led by industry, but working in partnership with the people who are training, so that you get the best of both the sort of what we need people to do in the future and how that might be delivered and it's joined together. And I think we really do need to focus on the future. It's incredibly difficult to predict what jobs are going to be like in 10 years' time. We don't know that. I said in a speech that I made a couple of days ago that large corporates are ditching doing long-term strategic plans because they have no clue what their business is going to look like. So I think we need, though, to focus in on those skills, those enterprise skills that the Foundation for Young Australians mentioned in their new basics report, the things like creativity, critical thinking, teamwork, digital skills, those things that underpin every job in the future for greater or lesser extent, and ground those in the vocational areas that we need to focus on in the future, matched to our future skills needs.
Of course, the future of work was the title of CEDA's research of 18 months ago that pointed the direction that Sarah was talking about, and I think we talked about some jobs that may be around in 20 years' time, but I think we also talked about many more jobs that won't be around in another 5 or 10. Look, I wanted to pick up a thread that came out from some of those comments, and that is particularly identifying early on in school education some sort of a career path. But if I think back now, one of my kids, for example, in high school decided that she would do some training through the local TAFE as part of her high school certificate in New South Wales. When I came to Victoria some years ago to be the senior executive of Victoria University, it was a dual sector institution, and we had numerous discussions then about how you integrate what some of our vocational education and training people were doing to go to a higher education course, or whether someone doing higher education might pick up some vet courses and have recognition for it. Are we any further down the track to be able to get an integrated system that identifies, say, at the school level, some career paths and provide opportunities there? But then conversely, if we take it to the next level in terms of the recognition question that might be there between the university, the higher education sector, vocational education, training and sector, and then school sector, are we much further advanced in being able to get a recognition across Australia of the significance of those training components?
Look, if we get down to the real basics, and this is a real bugbear of mine, so unfortunately you've wandered into it. I just don't think we spend enough time talking about careers in an early enough stage in life. And I think that, you know, it was interesting. We organised a session for a class of year 11 girls from a girls' school to talk about engineering, what engineering meant to them. So they were asked a question when first started, you know, who'd be interested in working in engineering, and one of the girls in the class put their hand up. And then they were set a couple of projects to do, and we got involved with them. And by the end of the month or so we were working with them, about 75% of them wanted to get involved in engineering when they understood what it really meant, when they understood that, you know, design is part of engineering. So it's about broadening children's minds to what is actually a career. What are the careers you can have out there? We continue to be so conservative in our approach to career management, and the amount of times you talk to people who fall into careers, well, it's a bloody disgrace in my mind. We need to be starting to support our kids and getting them to think about their careers. You know, you spend more time at bloody work than you do at home, so why don't we get it right?
I've been doing some research on this recently and talking to quite a lot of careers advisors in schools. And whilst there is some good practice in that, there are a lot of careers advisors who genuinely don't know what they don't know. Their careers advice revolves around having a bunch of leaflets about which university to go to. And I'm sorry to be so blunt about it, but it does. And also, worse than that, they don't seem to have a mechanism to learn about how things are changing in industry and how jobs are changing, and that leads to a very traditional view. For example, I was at a school where the careers teacher told me that some of the girls find maths really difficult. So she said to them, don't worry about that. We'll put you on a vet course for a couple of hours a week, and that'll help you get through your HSC. And that was encouraging somebody to give up maths. And she sent them to do, I think it was a drama course. And there's nothing wrong with a drama course, but not if it's an alternative to maths because you're finding it hard. That might limit your future career choices if you know, you want to go down a maths or STEM route later. So I think we really do need to give serious thought to how we support careers advice all the way through, because it's not just a school thing or a university thing. If the future of work is as we think it's going to be, and people are changing jobs so rapidly and skills needs are changing so rapidly, everybody will need careers advice all the way through their lives. It'll be like going for a checkup at the doctor's every couple of years. You go for a skills checkup to say, okay, what do we need, you know, how do I need to get a new skill set to cope with the future? This is an all-through life thing, and I do think it needs some serious review.
From a provider's perspective?
Yeah, I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. Look, I think it's a real challenge, career advice. I think if you look at careers counsellors in schools, it's not necessarily their fault because they went to school, go to university, go back to school and then is expected to give complex advice about opportunities in the labour market. The best careers advice is what you just heard about, is when industry engages at a school level, and that's challenging because it costs money, but they engage with schools and potential school leavers around the wonderful opportunities that are out there in occupations that they would never have considered. I remember an example in Queensland once. It was in the marine industry. A big employer there just could not get anyone to come and work for them. So they started owning schools. They picked about 10 schools, actively went every Friday, provided information, because they had careers in trades and in boat building and all sorts of things. And they ended up having 200 school-based apprentices. It was a wonderful model. Unfortunately, the GFC impacted on that industry, but it was a real demonstration to me of what can be done around a partnership with our schools and industry.
Probably, I'd just say to that too, Stephen, that the Sarah's last comment about careers advice at any time in life. We have a much older than average workforce in aged care. People who reinvent themselves coming back to be recreational officers, they used to be school teachers. So people being able to reinvent themselves, and it's being obvious, where do you get that information? Sometimes it's approaching TAFE and leafing through courses and seeing what that is, but our ability to connect that better, even from a government level, about what are the jobs this year and for the next 5 years that are not going to be subject to digital transformation, might actually encourage people to think about how to access these jobs. I think there are a lot of jobs going in the services industries coming up in the next 5 or 10 years that are not going to be replaced by computers.
I'd like now to pass over to the audience to perhaps see if there are any questions that people have. And again, if you could just raise your hand and indicate who you are and put a question to any single or to the panel more generally. And I have the first one just here. Thank you.
Stuart Humphreys-Gray from Box Hill TAFE. Thanks for your panel discussion. It seems to me that we talk about careers, lifetime learning, and we talked in, I'll quote, school sector, vet sector, higher ed sector. Why isn't there a school sector and a tertiary sector with a vocational stream and a research stream?
That's a fantastic point, and I'll absolutely agree with you because that's the way we should approach it. And why is there such a difference? I don't think there's a difference in your thinking or in the university sector's thinking. It's a difference in how it's governed and funded. And one is subject to the beauties of the federation, so 8 different approaches. Every player wins a prize. One single policy environment, single funder. Ultimately, it's about fixing that. I absolutely think we should have a tertiary sector, yes.
Everyone's shaking their heads in agreement, furious agreement up here. Thank you.
John Barnes from RMIT. I think, Nick, this is probably a question most specifically at you, but others might like to mention it. There's a group of vet training we haven't spoken about much, and it's apprentices. And I'm just wondering, in the apprenticeship system, in the context of what we've spoken about there, careers, the flexibility of training packages, particularly in traditional engineering apprentices, it's a system we've had around for a very long time in this country. Just wonder what your view is about where it could be taken into the future.
Yeah, great question. We're in the process with our organisation in looking at apprenticeships, and one of the things that we're looking at is working more collaboratively with trade unions as well around changing the way that the business looks around, you know, the traditional apprenticeship schemes. It's important to bring along the unions, I think, because they get quite protective of these areas, rightly so. So I think from our perspective, one of the things that we're doing is we're looking at a far broader set of skills, so looking at multi-skilling, more broader, diverse apprenticeships, rather than your multiple narrow streams. In our sector, apprenticeships have come the full gambit. You know, we had them up until about the 90s, then we stopped because we thought it was a great idea, and how smart were we? And we're back again. So, you know, we've really now got to start to build a different type of apprenticeship. It has to be central to what we want to do, and it should be something that we should be spruiking effectively back into the schools, because it's exciting, really exciting stuff that we're looking at doing now. You know, one of the things that some of my team are looking at in the rail industry, let's think about the rail industry, is using virtual reality as a training medium. Gosh, you know, this is really starting to get fascinating, and people think we're just, you know, the old railway with, you know, 60-odd-year-old blokes with sickies hanging out the corner of their mouth, effing and blinding. Well, we're not. It's starting to change. The world is starting to change, and the apprenticeship team is going to be really, really central to that.
I would have to agree. I mean, I think there's been such a huge drop in apprenticeships, largely in the non-trade areas. But I think some of that is also to do with perception, and I don't think some of the reputational damage in the sector has helped in terms of that, because parents are a little bit more hesitant about advising their children to go into an apprenticeship. So I think we need to do something about rebuilding the brand of apprenticeships, without a doubt. But I agree with you on the industry side. We look after printing and graphic arts, and the printing industry, a lot of people think it's a sort of a dying area. It's absolutely not. It's just reinvented itself. To look at all sorts of different technologies, not just changing from traditional print into digital, but also looking at packaging, at food security, a whole load of different ways of engaging with the public, whether it's walking into a fashion retailer and being able to pick up from your phone what your preferences are. All of these things have something to do with printing. So not many people know this, though. So getting that message out about how industries are changing and getting those messages into school is really important in terms of reinvigorating people's desire to go into apprenticeships and traineeships.
That whole issue of apprenticeships and the style of apprenticeships now, it does seem to me that we seem to be stuck in a bit of a time warp about our impression as what an apprenticeship is. I mean, I come from Wollongong, and therefore the steel industry that used to thrive on employing all sorts of apprentices across a variety of different trades and so on is completely different now. Hairdressing, some other personal services, apprenticeships and so on. We've just heard examples around the rail industry and so on. It's been put to me, for example, today, if you're a sparky or a plumber, you've got to know something about 3D printing, etc. What does that say then generally about how we get uniformity across Australia in terms of the curricula that we offer in those various areas where they have traditionally had a hands-on apprenticeship model in place? What do we need to do to try and change that?
That's got to be yours, sure.
So I think one of the issues is that currently apprenticeships and traineeships tend to be very long qualifications. And I don't think we're going to have the luxury of being able to spend 4 years doing an apprenticeship in the future. I think we need to be able to look at it in a slightly different way and start maybe with, do it in stages basically, because the skills needs are going to change faster. I think that's one thing. I think secondly, we do have a really great national qualification system in Australia. And I worry, I was also a little bit worried about the Minister saying that we're going to, in Victoria, introduce new, faster ways of doing qualifications that don't fit within the national system, because I think maintaining that national consistency is really, really important for standards and quality. Also for employers that obviously work in a whole load of different parts of Australia. So I think we need to have a national system that is consistent across states and territories, that is flexible and fast, but gives people those underpinning skills that are going to prepare them for sort of a wider range of jobs in their industry. The SSOs, the skills service organisations, obviously working with their industries, do have a key role to play in that, because we're sort of responsible for making sure that you've got those qualifications that underpin apprenticeships and traineeships. So the relationship with industry is absolutely critical in getting that information in.
So for me, it is about the collaboration between academia and industry is critical, and we've been disjointed for too many years. Too many people have seen it as a commercial entity, and we all know we've got to go out and make some money, but the most effective way to make money is do something that's worthwhile. And I think that if industry and academia are joined at the hip when they're actually looking at qualifications of any sort, it's going to be far more effective. So I'd stress that we need to just integrate more and more.
Any further questions from, yes, down the front, thank you.
Hi, Jennifer Boulding from Programmed. The panel has spoken a bit about the role of schools in providing students with more information about prospective career opportunities, but I'm also interested in your opinion on how we change the status of apprenticeships and traineeships as a career option, because I still think as a society we have a very strong bias towards tertiary education that produces a degree that's not necessarily a trade or a technical degree, and I think students see apprenticeships and traineeships as what you go into if you're not successfully completing or getting an ATAR score that's going to take you down the university pathway. And we know that we're producing a lot of university graduates who can't find meaningful employment in the area that they've trained in, and then on the other hand we have too few people meeting the demand for qualified trainees and apprentices. So I'm very interested in what you see as the role of, I guess, industry, schools and parents in changing the brand status, if you like, of those career pathways through training.
I'll just quickly tell you a bit about something I did when I was in the UK, which was leading the development of higher level apprenticeships, which was apprenticeships that start at like first year degree level, but we also did a master's level. And we did it for two reasons mainly. One, because we wanted to diversify the talent pool that we could choose from in the workforce. And two, because as here, the apprenticeship brand had suffered a bit of reputational damage. And I believe that by getting industry to step up and say we really value apprenticeships and we really want to employ apprentices, then you could start to change that. So I worked together with all of our competitors, so with Ernst & Young, Deloitte and Accenture and all sorts of people. And we started from scratch and designed these higher level apprenticeships, which were to take people from school, instead of going to university, into almost a degree alternative program, but on the job, learning as you went along. We designed it all together. We said, what job role are people going to do? What will they need to learn to do that? And then we worked with providers to form that into a deliverable, practical, accessible qualification, or set of qualifications. We had it all obviously signed off by all of the various regulators and then started delivering it. And we did it start to end in 8 months. And it did revolutionize the apprenticeship landscape, because then the legal practices came on board, and nursing and financial services and banking and all sorts. And now in the UK, you've got higher level apprenticeships in most industries, whether it's trade or non-trade. And it did do a lot to rebuild the reputation. So I think that industry voice saying, look, we really want to take apprentices into our businesses. And it has to be we started it with big companies, but it has to be all sizes. So the big companies need to take responsibility for getting the small companies involved as well and supporting that. And that's one example of how I've been involved in doing that in the past.
And look, I think it's a really good example. Look, apprenticeships and traineeships work really well. They're really cool. But government's proven in the past that if there's a dedicated commitment, it can make an enormous difference to their status. I know if you go back to the Howard government, there was a real view that apprenticeships and vet was seen as second-class citizen. If you go back 50 years to the Martin report, it's throughout that report, so it's not a new issue. Maybe it's time to fix it. So with the national partnership beckoning, that's the place to commit governments of all colours across the country to not only the importance and marketing of apprenticeships, but to relationships with industry, ensuring we position industry to help drive these skills needs. And then it's about how you support schools with rich information. It can absolutely be done, and let's hope it's not far away.
I agree with both of those things, and I'd just like to add what I keep rattling on about. It's all about career advice, and if those career advisors have got the right information they can support the students in making the right decisions. And I think that the other end of it, universities can benefit from this, because as you get better qualifications, more complex apprenticeships, people will want to continue their education. So, universities benefit from it. So it's just having that joined up approach.
And maybe taking a positive approach to schooling, where there is obviously a great groundswell around, what ATAR you're going to get. Really, the idea I think schools might play out better is, or they try, certainly in my own kids' example, is the world of choice is open up to you. You get a lot more choice based on how this ATAR goes. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do any of those things. And I think making more in schools, I think if anything, if I could, wave a wand across society, it would be doing something about school and this whole meritocratic thing that says you have to do everything towards an ATAR, or the schools are driven towards getting a better ATAR. Everyone worries about the test results, or the parents worry about whether the kids come out with these schools that get that higher ATAR. We should all just stop it. And actually going back to what drives the nation, what drives wealth into the future and a better society, isn't that. And so the sooner we all wake up to that, it's very hard to know how that's going to happen, though. I don't have that magic wand, so.
I have time for one final question, if there is a view. Then I have. One final question just to wrap this up. We've heard much about the reputation that Australian vocational education and training has sustained over a period of time. There is a question at the moment as to whether we'll be sitting back on our laurels and it'll all be right in the morning when we wake up. But I just wonder, is there an opportunity, and has this been actively explored, for Australia to export its knowledge in vocational education and training? Have we taken any steps, the right step, to export the knowledge that we have to improve vocational education and training opportunities in our near region or beyond?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? Australia has a very successful export industry in international education, but that's more about bringing students inboard, in country. The transnational approach, the opportunity to engage with emerging economies around their vocational sector is a tremendous opportunity, and Australia plays in this field, but we get smashed by people who are better at it. Namely, the best example is Germany. Germany invests heavily. It's a loss leader. They get in and spend lots of money helping countries develop early parts of their educational frameworks, knowing that the benefits later. Australia's less adept at that. We sort of go over there and hope to win contracts and things, whereas they're spending money. Internationally, like Japan's really starting to focus on its skills requirements now. China's really focusing on a vocational system, don't really know how to do it, particularly in health and aged care. Tremendous opportunities that if we're clever around how we construct our initial engagements, there's some fantastic opportunities to develop long-term partnerships. But we'll have to spend some money to do it.
I agree with that. I think that we've got nations nearby that are almost begging us to go and help them do this thing. Thailand, as an example, came to have a conversation with us about the rail industry, where they're investing about $60 billion US. And they really wanted to create a link between vocational education into academic education, link that into their own academic system. And the rationale behind that was that they wanted to gain greater overseas credibility for the capability of the people working in their nation. And that, they thought, would then attract overseas investment. So there's a real logic around what people want to do, and we're not picking up the mantle. We're missing an opportunity here. So I think that we need to collaborate, but again, there is a huge opportunity to build on what we have here, and give it 5 or 10 years, we'll miss it. So we've got to get on that now.
I'm interested in that last couple of points because CEDA's major research report for next year is in fact on the productivity of services and using some examples of services sectors such as the education sector as an exporter, and I look forward perhaps to exploring that in a bit more detail when we release our report next year. Ladies and gentlemen, that does bring to an end the formal part of our question and answer session now. I'd like to invite Suzanne Rhoda-Hopkins, the General Manager, Training Services and Program, to offer the formal vote of thanks to our panellists.